All right. Let's go ahead and do more Bible reading. I really want to finish this because I've been talking about it for a while now. So let's, let's let most of today just be Bible readings. Maybe I'll do a little other thing later, but right now I think go ahead and do that. Give me 1 second though. There we go. There we go. Okay. All right. So gonna do the next AV in the series. Means the next 9, so that's gonna be 17 to 26? Is that right? 25. 17 to 25. So First Samuel 17. But first, oh no, my headphones aren't there. 1 sec. I probably need my ears to dry out a little bit. I just got done taking a shower. Okay. First Samuel 17. And the Philistines assembled their armies for war. They assembled at Sokotoa. Sorry, that just made me think of that sine before cosine or whatever, opposite over hypotenuse, all that. Oh, hold on 1 sec. Okay. They assembled at Soko, which belongs to Judah, and they camped between Soko and Azekah in Ephes-Dammim. Saul and the men of Israel assembled and camped in the valley of Elah, and they drew up in battle formation to meet the Philistines. The Philistines occupied the mountain on one side, and the Israelites occupied the mountain on the other side, with the valley between them. Then the champion came out from the camps of the Philistines. His name was Goliath from Gath, and his height was 6 cubits and a span. He had a helmet of copper on his head, and he was wearing a coat of mail of overlapping scales. The weight of copper coat mail, the weight of the copper coat of mail was 5,000 shekels. He had shin guards of copper on his legs and a javelin of copper slung between his shoulders. The wooden shaft of his spear was like the beam of loom workers, and the iron blade of his spear weighed 600 shekels, and his shield bearer was marching ahead of him. Then he stood and called out to the battle line of Israel, and said to them, "Why have you come out to draw up in battle formation? Am I not the Philistine? And are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves, and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and strike me down, we will then become your servants. But if I prevail against him and strike him down, you will become our servants and serve us." The Philistine then said, "I do taunt the battle line of Israel this day. Give me a man and let us fight it out." When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they became terrified and greatly afraid. Now David was the son of the Ephrathite from Bethlehem of Judah named Jesse, who had 8 sons, and who in the days of Saul was already an old man. The oldest sons of Jesse had followed Saul into the war. The names of his 3 sons who went to war were Eliab the firstborn, his second son Abinadab, and the third Shammah. David was the youngest, and the 3 oldest followed Saul. David was going back and forth from Saul to tend to the sheep of his father at Bethlehem. Meanwhile, the Philistine would come forward and take his position each morning and each evening for 40 days. Then Jesse said to his son David, "Please, take this ephah of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread and carry them quickly to your brothers in the camp. And take these 10 portions of cheese to the chief of the 1,000. Also, you should check on the welfare of your brothers and bring back some token from them." They were with Saul, and all the other men of Israel in the valley of Elah, fighting against the Philistines. So David got up early in the morning and left someone in charge of the sheep. Then he packed up and went to see just as Jesse had commanded him. When he came to the camp enclosure, the army was going out to the battle line, shouting a battle cry. Israel and the Philistines drew up so that one battle line faced the other battle line. David immediately left his baggage in the care of the baggage keeper and ran to the battle line. When he arrived, he began asking about the welfare of his brothers. While he was speaking with them, there came the champion named Goliath, the Philistine from Gath. He came out from the battle line of the Philistines, and he spoke the same words as before, and David heard him. When all the men of Israel saw the man, they fled from him terrified. The men of Israel were saying, "Have you seen this man who is coming out? He comes to taunt Israel. The king will give great riches to the man who strikes him down. He will give him his own daughter, and he will give the house of his father exemption in Israel." David began to say to the men who were standing near him, "What will be done for the man who strikes down the Philistine over there and takes away reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that should taunt the battle line of the living God?" Then the people told him the same thing as before. "This is what will be done for the man who strikes him down." When his oldest brother Eliab heard him speak to the men, he became angry with David and said, "Why have you come down, and with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? I well know your presumptuousness and the bad intentions of your heart. You came down just to see the battle." To this David said, "What have I done now? I was only asking a question." So he turned from him towards someone else and asked the same thing as before, and people gave him the same reply as before. The words that David had spoken were overheard and reported to Saul, so he sent for him. David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart because of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine." But Saul said to David, "You are not able to go and fight against this Philistine, for you are but a boy, and he has been a soldier from his youth." David then said to Saul, "Your servant became a shepherd of his father's flock, and a lion came, also a bear, and each carried off a sheep from the flock. I went out after it and struck it down and rescued it from its mouth. When it rose up against me, I grabbed it by its fur and struck it down and put it to death. Your servant struck down both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will become like one of them, for he has taunted the battle lines of the living God." Then David added, "Jehovah who rescued me from the claws of the lion and the bear, I'm sorry. He is the one who will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." At this, Saul said to David, "Go, and may Jehovah be with you." Saul now clothed David with his garments. He put a copper helmet on his head, after which he clothed him with a coat of mail. Then David strapped on his sword over his garments and tried to go, but could not, for he was not used to them. David said to Saul, I am unable to go in these things, for I am not used to them." So David took them off. He then took his staff in his hand and chose 5 smooth stones from the stream bed and placed them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and his sling was in his hand. And he began approaching the Philistine. The Philistine came closer and closer to David, and his shield bearer was ahead of him. When the Philistine looked and saw David, he sneered at him in contempt, because he was just a ruddy and handsome boy. So the Philistine said to David, "Am I a dog, so that you are coming against me with sticks?" With that, the Philistine cursed David by his gods. The Philistine said to David, "Just come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the heavens and to the beasts of the field." David replied to the Philistine, "You are coming against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I am coming against you in the name of Jehovah of armies, the God of the battle line of Israel, whom you have taunted. This very day Jehovah will surrender you into my hand, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. And on this day I will give the corpses of the camp of the Philistines, the birds of the heavens, and to the wild beasts of the earth, and people of all the earth will know that there is a God in Israel. And all those gathered here will know that it is not with the sword or the spear that Jehovah saves, for the battle belongs to Jehovah, and he will give all of you into our hand." Then the Philistine rose and drew steadily closer to meet David. But David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet the Philistine. David thrust his hand into his bag and took a stone from there and slung it. He struck the Philistine in the forehead, and the stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. He struck down the Philistine and put him to death, though there was no sword in David's hand. David continued running and stood over him. Then he took hold of the Philistine's sword and pulled it out its sheath and made sure that he was dead by cutting off his head with it. Then the Philistines saw that their mighty one had died. They fled. At that, the men of Israel and of Judah rose and broke into shouting and pursued the Philistines all the way from the valley to the gates of Ekron. And the slain of the Philistines lay fallen along the road from Sharaim as far as Gath and Ekron. After the Israelites returned from hotly pursuing the Philistines, they pillaged their camps. Then David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem, but he put the Philistine's weapons in his own tent. At the moment that Saul saw David go out to meet the Philistine, he said to Abner, the chief of his army, "Whose son is this boy, Abner?" Abner replied, "As surely as you live, O king, I do not know." The king said, "Find out whose son the young man is." So as soon as David returned from striking down the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul with the head of the Philistine in his hand. Saul now said to him, "Whose son are you, boy?" To which David said, "The son of your servant Jesse, the Bethlehemite." Okay. 1 Samuel 18. As soon as David had finished speaking to Saul, Jonathan and David became bound together in close friendship, and Jonathan began to love him as himself. From that day, Saul kept David with him, and he did not allow him to return to his father's house. And Jonathan and David made a covenant because he loved him as himself. Jonathan took off the sleeveless coat that he wore and gave it to David, along with his gear, his sword, his bow, and his belt. David began going out and was successful wherever Saul would send him. So Saul put him in charge of the fighting men, and this pleased all the people and their servants of Saul. Sorry, had a little sharp pain right there. When David and the others would return from striking down the Philistines, the women would come out from all the cities of Israel with song and dances to meet King Saul with tambourines, with rejoicing, and with lutes. The women who were celebrating would sing, "Saul has struck down his thousands, and David his tens of thousands." Saul became very angry, and the song displeased him, for he said, "They have credited David with tens of thousands, but to me they have credited thousands. The only thing left to give him is the kingship." From that day on, Saul was always looking at David suspiciously. The next day, a bad spirit from God gripped Saul, and he started to act strangely inside the house, while David was playing music on the harp as on other occasions. Saul had a spear in his hand, and he hurled the spear, saying to himself, "I will pin David to the wall." But David escaped him twice. Then Saul was afraid of David because Jehovah was with him and had departed from Saul. So Saul removed him from his presence and appointed him as chief of 1,000, and David would lead the army into battle. David continued to have success in all he did, and Jehovah was with him. And when Saul saw that he was very successful, he became afraid of him. But all Israel and Judah loved David because he would lead them in their campaigns. Later Saul said to David, "Here is my oldest daughter Merab. I will give her to you as a wife. However, you should continue to display your courage for me and fight the wars of Jehovah." For Saul said to himself, "Do not let my hands come against him. Let the hand of the Philistines strike him." At this, David said to Saul, "Who am I and who are my relatives, my father's family in Israel, for me to become son-in-law to the king?" However, when the time came to give Saul's daughter Merab to David, she had already been given to be the wife of Adriel, the Meholathite. Now Saul's daughter Michal was in love with David, and it was reported to Saul, and this pleased him. So Saul said, "I will give her to him to serve as a snare to him, so that the hand of the Philistines may come upon him." Saul then said to David a second time, "You will form a marriage alliance with me today." Further, Saul ordered his servants. Sorry. One sec. Speak to David secretly and say, 'Look, the king is pleased with you, and all his servants are fond of you. So now form a marriage alliance with the king.' When Saul's servants told David these things, David said, 'Is it a trivial matter to you to form a marriage alliance with the king when I am a man poor and lightly esteemed?' Then Saul's servants reported to him, 'These are the words that David spoke.' At that Saul said, 'This is what you should say to David. The king does not want any bride price except 100 foreskins of the Philistines to take revenge on the enemies of the king.' For Saul was scheming to have David fall by the hand of the Philistines. So his servants reported these words to David, and it was pleasing to David to form a marriage alliance with the king. Before the allotted time, David went with his men and struck down 200 Philistine men, and David brought the full number of their foreskins to the king to form a marriage alliance with the king. Therefore Saul gave him his daughter Michal as a wife. Saul realized that Jehovah was with David and that the daughter Michal loved him. This made Saul even more afraid of David, and Saul became an enemy of David for the rest of his life. The princes of the Philistines would go out to battle, but as often as they went out, David was more successful than all the servants of Saul, and his name was highly esteemed. 1 Samuel 19. Saul later spoke to Jonathan, his son, and all his servants about putting David to death. Since Saul's son Jonathan was very fond of David, Jonathan told David, "My father Saul wants to have you put to death. Please be on your guard in the morning and go to a secret place and remain hidden. I will go out and stand next to my father in the field where you will be. I will talk about you to my father, and if I learn anything, I will be sure to tell you." So Jonathan spoke well of David to his father Saul. He said to him, "The king should not sin against his servant David, for he has not sinned against you, and what he has done for you has benefited you. He risked his life to strike down the Philistine, so that Jehovah brought about a victory for all Israel. You saw it, and you were overjoyed. So why should you sin against the innocent blood in having David put to death for no reason?" Saul listened to Jonathan, and Saul swore, "As surely as Jehovah is living, he will not be put to death." Afterward, Jonathan called David and told him all these things. So Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he continued to serve him as before. In time, war broke out again, and David went out and fought against the Philistines and struck them down with great slaughter, and they fled from before him. And a bad spirit from Jehovah came upon Saul when he was sitting in his house with his spear in his hand, while David was playing music on the harp. Saul tried to pin David to the wall with the spear, but he eluded Saul, who drove the spear into the wall. David fled and escaped during the night. Saul later sent messages to David's house to watch it and to kill him in the morning. But David's wife Michal told him, "If you do not escape tonight, tomorrow you will be a dead man." Immediately Michal let David down through the window so that he could run away and escape. Michal took the teraphim statue and placed it on the bed, and she put a net of goat hair at the place of his head, and she covered it with a garment. Saul now sent messengers to take David, but she said, "He is sick." So Saul sent the messengers to see David and told them, "Bring him to me on his bed to have him put to death." When the messengers came, there was the teraphim statue on the bed and a net of goat hair where his head would have been. Saul said to Michal, "Why did you trick me like this and send my enemy away so that he could escape?" Michal replied to Saul, "He said to me, 'Send me away or I will kill you.'" Now David had run away and escaped, and he came to Samuel at Ramah. He told him that all that Saul had done to him, and he and Samuel went away, and they stayed in Naioth. In time it was reported to Saul, "Look, David is in Naioth in Ramah." At once Saul sent messengers to seize David. When they saw the elderly ones of the prophets prophesying, and Samuel standing and presiding over them, the Spirit of God came to be upon Saul's messengers, and they began behaving as prophets as well. When they told it to Saul, he immediately sent other messengers, and they too began behaving as prophets. So Saul sent messengers again, a third group, and they too began behaving as prophets. Finally, he also went to Ramah. When he reached the great cistern that is in Seku, he asked, "Where are Samuel and David?" They replied, "They're in Naioth in Ramah." While Saul was on his way there to Naioth in Ramah, the Spirit of God came upon him, and he walked along behaving as a prophet until he came to Naioth in Ramah. He also stripped off his garments, and he too believed as a prophet before Samuel, and he lay there naked all that day and all that night. That is why they say, is Saul also among the prophets? Okay, 1 Samuel 20. Then David ran away from Naioth and Ramah. However, he came to Jonathan and said, "What have I done? What is my offense? And how have I sinned against your father for him to seek my life?" At this, Jonathan said to him, "It is unthinkable. You will not die. Look, my father will not do anything, great or small, without disclosing it to me. Why should my father hide this matter from me? This will not happen." But David swore further and said, "Your father surely knows that I have found favor in your eyes," and would say, "Do not let Jonathan know this, or he will be upset. But as surely as Jehovah is living, and as surely as you are living, there is only a step between me and death." Then Jonathan said to David, "Whatever you say, I will do it for you." David said to Jonathan, "Tomorrow is the new moon, and I am certainly expected to sit with the king to eat. You must send me away, and I will hide in the field until the evening on the third day. If your father misses me at all, then say, 'David begged me for permission to go quickly to his city Bethlehem, because there is a yearly sacrifice there for all the family.' If his response is, 'That is fine,' it means peace to your servant. But if he becomes angry, you can be sure that he is determined to harm me. Show loyal love to your servant, for you have brought your servant into Jehovah's covenant with you. But if I am guilty, put me to death yourself. Why turn me over to your father?" To this, Jonathan said, "It is unthinkable to suggest that about you. If I learn that from my father is determined to harm you, would I not tell you?" Then David said to Jonathan, "Who will tell me whether your father gives you a harsh answer?" Jonathan said to David, "Come, let us go out into the field." So both of them went out into the field. And Jonathan said to David, "Let Jehovah the God of Israel be a witness that I will sound out my father about this time tomorrow or by the third day. If he is favorably disposed toward David, I will not then send you word. Will I not then send you word and disclose it to you? But if my father intends to harm you, may Jehovah do that and more to Jonathan, if I do not disclose it to you and send you away in peace. May Jehovah be with you, just as he was with my father. And will you not show me the loyal love of Jehovah while I am alive, and even when I die? Never withdraw your loyal love from my household, even when Jehovah wipes out all the enemies of David from the face of the earth." So Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, "Jehovah will require it, and call David's enemies to account." So Jonathan had David swear again by his love for him, for he loved him as he loved himself. Jonathan then said to him, "Tomorrow is a new moon, and you will be missed, for your seat will be vacant. By the third day, you will be missed even more, and you must go to the place where you hid the other day, and stay near the stone there. I will then shoot 3 arrows to one side of it, as though I were shooting at a target. When I send the attendant, I will say, 'Go, find the arrows.' If I say to the attendant, 'Look, the arrows are on this side of you, get them, and then you may come back. For as surely as Jehovah is living, it means everything is peaceful for you, and there is no danger. But if I should say to the boy, 'Look, the arrows are beyond you,' then go, for Jehovah has sent you away. As for the promise that we have made, you and I, may Jehovah be between us forever." So David hid in the field. When the new moon came, the king took his seat at the meal to eat. The king was sitting in his usual seat by the wall. Jonathan was facing him, and Abner was sitting at Saul's side, but David's place was vacant. Saul did not say anything that day, for he said to himself, "Something has happened so that he is not clean. Yes, he must be unclean." And the day after that, the new moon, on the second day, David's place continued vacant. Saul then said to Jonathan, his son, "Why has the son of Jesse not come to the meal either yesterday or today?" Jonathan answered Saul, "David begged me for permission to go to Bethlehem. He said, 'Please permit me to go, because we have a family sacrifice in the city, and my own brother summoned me. So if I have found favor in your eyes, please let me slip away to see my brothers.' That is why he has not come to the king's table." Then Saul became enraged with Jonathan, and he said, "You son of a rebellious woman, do you think I do not know that you are choosing to side with the son of Jesse, to your own shame and to the shame of your mother? As long as the son of Jesse is alive on the earth, You and your kingship will not be firmly established. So now send someone to bring him to me, for he must die." However, Jonathan said to Saul his father, "Why should he be put to death? What has he done?" At that, Saul hurled the spear at him to strike him. So Jonathan knew that his father was determined to put David to death. Jonathan immediately rose up from the table in the heat of anger, and he did not eat any of the food on the second day after the new moon, for he is upset over David, and his own father had humiliated him. Okay. In the morning, Jonathan went out to the field for the appointment with David, and a young attendant was with him. And he said to his attendant, "Please run and find the arrows that I shoot." The attendant ran, and Jonathan shot the arrow beyond him. When the attendant reached the place where Jonathan had shot the arrow, Jonathan called out to the attendant, "Is not the arrow beyond you?" Jonathan called out to the attendant, "Hurry, quickly, do not delay." And Jonathan's attendant picked up the arrows and came back to his master. The attendant did not understand anything about the matter. Only Jonathan and David knew what was meant. Then Jonathan gave his weapons to his attendant and told him, "Go, take them to the city." When the attendant left, David rose up from a place nearby that was to the south. Then he fell with his face to the ground and bowed 3 times, and they kissed each other and wept for each other. But David wept the most. Jonathan said to David, "Go in peace, since we have both sworn in the name of Jehovah, saying, 'May Jehovah be between you and me and between your offspring and my offspring forever.'" Then David rose up and left, and Jonathan went back to the city. I forgot when I stopped. I think it was 25. Yeah, 25. So I was 20, I think. Yep. 1 Samuel 21. David later came to Nob to Abimelech the priest. Abimelech began to tremble when he met David, and he said to him, "Why are you by yourself, and no one is with you?" David replied to Ahimelech, not Abimelech, Ahimelech, the priest, "The king instructed me to do something, but he said, 'Do not let anyone know anything about the mission on which I am sending you and about the instructions I have given you. I made an appointment with my young men to meet at a certain place. Now, if there are 5 loaves of bread at your disposal, just give them to me, or whatever is available.' But the priest answered David, 'There is no ordinary bread on hand, but there is holy bread, provided that the young men have kept away from women.' David answered the priest, 'Women have certainly been kept away from us, as on previous occasions when I went out on a campaign. If the bodies of the young men are holy, even when the mission is ordinary, how much more so today should they be holy?' So the priest gave him the holy bread, because there was no bread there except the showbread, which had been removed from Jehovah's presence to be replaced by fresh bread on the day it was taken away. Now one of Saul's servants was there on that day, detained before Jehovah. His name was Doeg the Edomite, the chief of Saul's shepherds. David then said to Ahimelech, 'Is there a spear or a sword here at your disposal?' I did not take my own sword or my weapons with me, because the king's mission was urgent." To this the priest said, "The sword of Goliath, the Philistine, whom you struck down in the valley of Elah, is here, wrapped up in a cloth behind the ephod. If you want to take it for yourself, take it, because it is the only one here." David said, "There is none like it. Give it to me." That day, David rose up and continued his flight from Saul, and he eventually came to King Achish of Gath. The servants of Achish said to him, "Is this not David, the king of the land? Is he not the one they sang about when they danced, saying, 'Saul has struck down his thousands, and David his tens of thousands?'" David took these words to heart, and he became very much afraid of King Achish of Gath. So he disguised his sanity in their presence and acted insane while among them. He was making marks on the door of the gate and letting his saliva run down his beard. Finally, Achish said to his servants, "You see that this man is crazy. Why bring him to me? Do I have a shortage of crazy men that I need to have this one acting crazy before me? Should this man enter my house?" 1 Samuel 22. So David went from there, escaping to the cave of Adullam. When his brothers and his father's entire house heard of it, they went down there to him. And those who were in trouble and in debt, who had a grievance, gathered to him, and he became their chief. There were about 400 men with him. David later went from there to Mizpah and Moab, and said to the king of Moab, "Please let my father and mother stay with you until I know what God will do for me." So he left them with the king of Moab, and they stayed with him the whole time that David was in the stronghold. In time, Gad the prophet said to David, "Do not stay in the stronghold. Go from there into the land of Judah." So David left and went into the forest of Hereth. Saul heard that David and the men with him had been found. Saul was sitting in the Gibeah under the tamarisk tree on the high place with his spear in his hand, and all the servants were stationed around him. Then Saul said to his servants stationed around him, "Listen, please, you Benjaminites. Will the son of Jesse also give fields and vineyards to all of you? Will he appoint all of you as chiefs of thousands and chiefs of hundreds? All of you have conspired against Jesse. Oh, sorry, against me. No one informed me when my own son made a covenant with the son of Jesse. None of you has sympathy for me and informs me that my own son has incited my own servants against me to ambush me, as is now the case." Then Doeg, the Edomite, who was stationed there over the servants of Saul, answered, "I saw the son of Jesse come to Nob to Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, and he inquired of Jehovah for him and gave him provisions. He even gave him the sword of Goliath the Philistine." At once the king sent for Ahimelech, son of Ahitub, the priest, and all the priests of the father's house who were in Nob. So all of them came to the king. Saul now said, "Listen, please, you son of Ahitub." To which he replied, "Here I am, my lord." Saul said to him, "Why have you conspired against me, you and the son of Jesse, by giving him bread and a sword, and by making an inquiry of God for him? He opposes me and waits in an ambush, as is now the case." At this Ahimelech answered the king, "Who among all your servants is as trustworthy as David? He is the king's son-in-law and a chief over your bodyguard and honored in your house. Was today the first time I inquired of God for him? What you are saying is unthinkable on my part. Do not let the king hold anything against his servant and anything my father's entire house, for your servant did not know a single thing about any of this." But the king said, "You will surely die, Ahimelech, you along with all your father's house." With that, the king said to the guards stationed around him, "Turn and kill the priests of Jehovah, because they have sided with David." They knew that he was a runaway, and they did not inform me. But the king's servants did not want to lift their hands to assault the priests of Jehovah. Then the king said to Doeg, "You turn and assault the priests." Immediately Doeg the Edomite went and assaulted the priests himself. He killed on that day 85 men wearing the linen ephod. He also struck Nob, the city of the priests, with the sword, man as well as woman, child as well as infant, bull, donkey, and sheep he put to the sword. However, one son of Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, whose name was Abiathar, escaped and ran away to follow David. Abiathar told David, "Saul has killed the priests of Jehovah." At this David said to Abiathar, "I knew on that day, when Doeg the Edomite was there, that he would be sure to tell Saul, 'I am personally responsible for the death of everyone, and your father's house. Stay with me, do not be afraid, for whoever seeks your life seeks my life. You are under my protection." 1 Samuel 23. In time, David was told, "The Philistines are fighting against Keilah, and they are raiding the threshing floors." So David inquired of Jehovah, "Should I go and strike down these Philistines?" Jehovah said to David, "Go strike down the Philistines and rescue Keilah." But the men of David said to him, "Look, we are afraid while here in Judah. How much more so if we go to Keilah against the battle line of the Philistines?" So David inquired once again of Jehovah. Jehovah now answered him, "Rise up, go down to Keilah, because I will give you the Philistines into your hand." So David went with his men to Keilah and fought against the Philistines. He carried off their livestock and struck them down with a great slaughter, and David rescued the inhabitants of Keilah. Now when Abiathar, the son of Ahimelech, ran away to David at Keilah, he had an ephod with him. Saul was told, "David has come to Keilah." Then Saul said, "God has handed him over to me, so he has trapped himself by entering a city with gates and bars." So Saul summoned all the people to war to go down to Keilah and besiege David and his men. When David learned that Saul was plotting against him, he said to Abiathar the priest, "Bring the ephod here." Then David said, "O Jehovah, the God of Israel, your servant has indeed heard that Saul intends to come to Keilah to destroy the city because of me. Will the leaders of Keilah surrender me into his hand? Will Saul come down as your servant has heard? O Jehovah, the God of Israel, please tell your servant." To this Jehovah said, "He will come down." David asked, "Will the leaders of Keilah surrender me and my men into Saul's hand?" Jehovah replied, "They will surrender you." At once David rose up with his men, about 600 in number, and they left Keilah and moved about wherever they could. When Saul was told that David had escaped from Keilah, he did not go out after him. David stayed in the wilderness in places difficult to approach, in the mountainous region of the wilderness of Ziph. Saul searched for him constantly, but Jehovah did not give him into his hand. Hold on one sec. Okay. David was aware that Saul had gone out to seek his life, while David was in the wilderness of Ziph at Horesh. Jonathan, the son of Saul, now went out to David at Horesh and helped him find strength in Jehovah. He said to him, "Do not be afraid, for my father Saul will not find you. You will be king over Israel, and I will become second to you, and my father also knows that." Then the two of them made a covenant before Jehovah, and David stayed in Horesh, and Jonathan went to his home. The men of Ziph later went up to Saul at Gibeah, and said, "Is not David hiding near us in the places difficult to approach at Horesh on the hill of Hachilah, which is south of Jeshimon? Whenever it pleases you to come down, O king, come and we will surrender him into the hand of the king." At this Saul said, "May you be blessed by Jehovah, for you have shown compassion to me. Please go and try to find out exactly where he is and who saw him there, for I have been told he is very cunning. Carefully ascertain where all his hiding places are, and return to me with the evidence. I will then go with you, and if he is in the land, I will search him out among all the thousands of Judah." So they left and went to Ziph ahead of Saul, while David and his men were in the wilderness of Maon, in the Arabah to the south of Jeshimon. Then Saul came with his men to look for him. When David was told, he at once went down to the crag and stayed in the wilderness of Maon. When Saul heard this, he chased after David into the wilderness of Maon. As Saul came to one side of the mountain, David and his men were on the other side of the mountain. David was hurrying to get away from Saul, but Saul and his men were closing in on David and his men to capture him. But a messenger came to Saul, saying, "Come quickly, for the Philistines have made a raid on the land." And at that, Saul stopped chasing after David and went to confront the Philistines. That is why that place was named the Crag of the Divisions. Then David made his way up from there and stayed in the places difficult to approach at En-Gedi. 1 Samuel 24. As soon as Saul returned from pursuing the Philistines, they told him, "Look, David is in the wilderness of En-Gedi." So Saul took 3,000 men chosen from all Israel and went to look for David and his men on the rocky cliffs of the mountain goats. Saul came to the stone sheepfolds along the road where there was a cave, and he went in to relieve himself, while David and his men were sitting in the recesses at the back of the cave. David's men said to him, "This is the day on which Jehovah is saying to you, 'Look, I am giving your enemy into your hand, and you can do to him whatever seems good to you.'" So David rose up and quietly cut off the edge of Saul's sleeveless coat. But afterward, David's heart kept striking him because he had cut off the edge of Saul's sleeveless coat. Okay. He said to the man, "It is unthinkable from Jehovah's standpoint that I should do such a thing to my Lord, the anointed of Jehovah, by lifting my hand against him, for he is the anointed of Jehovah." So David restrained his men with these words, and he did not allow them to attack Saul. As for Saul, he rose up from the cave and went on his way. Then David got up and went out from the cave and called out after Saul, "My lord the king." When Saul looked behind him, David bowed down low with his face to the ground and prostrated himself. David said to Saul, "Why do you listen to the words of men who say, 'Look, David is seeking to harm you'? This very day your own eyes have seen how Jehovah gave you into my hand in the cave. But when someone said to kill you, I had pity on you and said, 'I will not lift my hand against my Lord, for he is the anointed of Jehovah.' And look, my father, yes, see the edge of your sleeveless coat in my hand. For when I cut off the edge of your sleeveless coat, I did not kill you. You can now see and understand that I do not intend to harm you or to rebel, and I have not sinned against you, whereas you are hunting me down to take my life. May Jehovah judge between you and me, and may Jehovah take vengeance on you for me, but my hand will not come against you. Just as the ancient proverb says, from the wicked comes wickedness, but my hand will not come against you. After whom has the king of Israel gone out? Whom are you chasing? A dead dog? A single flea? May Jehovah be the judge, and he will judge between you and me, and he will see and will plead my case, and judge me and rescue me from your hand." At the moment that David finished speaking these words, Saul said, "Is this your voice, my son David?" And Saul began to weep loudly. He said to David, "You are more righteous than I am, for you have treated me well, and I have repaid you with evil. Yes, today you have told me the good you did by not killing me when Jehovah surrendered me into your hand. For what man finds his enemy and sends him on his way unharmed? Jehovah will reward you with good because of what you have done for me today. And now look, I know that you will surely rule as king, and that in your hands the kingdom of Israel will endure. Now swear to me by Jehovah that you will not wipe out my descendants after me, and you will not annihilate my name out of my father's house." So David swore to Saul, after which Saul went home, but David and his men went up to the stronghold. 1 Samuel 25. In time Samuel died, and all Israel gathered together to mourn him and to bury him at his house in Ramah. Then David rose and went down to the wilderness of Paran. Now there was a man in Maon whose work was in Carmel. The man was very wealthy. He had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats, and he was shearing his sheep at Carmel. The man's name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail. The wife was discerning and beautiful, but the husband, a Calebite, was harsh and he behaved badly. David heard in the wilderness that Nabal was shearing his sheep. So David sent 10 young men to him, and David told the young men, "Go up to Carmel, and when you come to Nabal, ask him in my name about his welfare. Then say, 'May you live long, and may you be well, and may your household be well, and may all that you have be well. Now I hear that you are doing your shearing. When your shearing, your shepherds were with us. We did not harm them, and they found nothing missing the whole time they were in Carmel. Ask your young men, and they will tell you. May my young men find favor in your eyes, because we have come at a joyous time. Please give your servants and to your son David whatever you can spare." So David's young men went and told all this to Nabal in David's name. When they finished, Nabal answered David's servants, "Who is David, and who is the son of Jesse?" Nowadays, many servants are breaking away from their masters. "Do I have to take my bread and my water and the meat that I butchered for my shearers and give it to men who come from who knows where?" At that, David's young men returned and reported all these words to him. David immediately said to his men, "Everyone strap on your sword." So they all strapped on their swords, and David also strapped on his own sword. And about 400 men went up with David, while 200 men stayed with the baggage. Meanwhile, one of the servants reported to Abigail, Nabal's wife, "Look, David sent messengers from the wilderness to wish our master well, but he screamed insults at them. Those men were very good to us. They never harmed us, and we did not miss a single thing the whole time we were together with them in the fields. They were like a protective wall around us, both by night and by day, the whole time we were with them shepherding the flock. Now decide what you are going to do, for disaster has been determined against our master and against all his house, and he is such a worthless man that no one can speak to him." So Abigail quickly took 200 loaves of bread, 2 large jars of wine, 5 dressed sheep, 5 shah measures, roasted grain, 100 cakes of raisins, and 200 cakes of pressed figs, and put all of it on the donkeys. Then she said to her servants, "Go on ahead of me, I will follow you." But she said nothing to her husband Nabal. While she was riding on the donkey and going down under cover of the mountain, just then David and his men were coming down toward her, and she met them. Now David had been saying, "It was for nothing that I guarded everything that belongs to his fellow in the wilderness. Not a single thing belongs to him went missing. And yet he repays me evil for good. May God do the same and more to the enemies of David if I allow a single male of his to survive until morning." When Abigail caught sight of David, she hurried down off the donkey and threw herself face down before David, bowing to the ground. She then fell to his feet and said, "My lord, let the blame be on me. Let your servant girl speak to you, and listen to the words of your servant girl. Please do not let my lord pay attention to this worthless Nabal, for he is just like his name, Nabal, in his name, and senselessness is with him. But I, your servant girl, did not see my lord. Oh my gosh, did not see my lord's young men whom you sent. And now, my lord, as surely as Jehovah is living, as you are living, it is Jehovah who has held you back from incurring blood guilt and from taking revenge with your own hand. May your enemies and those seeking injury to my lord become like Nabal. Now let this gift that your servant girl has brought to my lord be given to the young men who are following my lord. Pardon, please, the transgression of your servant girl, for Jehovah will, without fail, make for my lord a lasting house, because my lord is fighting the wars of Jehovah, and no evil has been found in all your days. When someone rises up to pursue you and seeks your life, the life of my lord will be wrapped securely in the bag of life with Jehovah your God. But the lives of your enemies he will hurl away like stones from a sling. And when Jehovah has done for my Lord all the good things he has promised, and he appoints you as leader over Israel, you will have no remorse or regret in your heart for shedding blood without cause, and for letting the hand of my Lord take revenge. When Jehovah confers good upon my Lord, remember your servant girl." At this David said to Abigail, "Praise Jehovah, the God of Israel, who sent you to this day to me. And blessed be your good sense. May you be blessed for restraining me this day from incurring blood guilt and from taking revenge with my own hands. Otherwise, as surely as Jehovah, the God of Israel, who held me back from harming you, is living, if you had not come quickly to meet me, by morning there would not have remained a single male belonging to Nabal." With that, David accepted from her what she had brought him and said to her, "Go up in peace to your house. See, I have listened to you, and I will grant your request." Abigail later went back to Nabal, who was feasting like a king in his house. And Nabal was in a good mood and was drunk as he could be. She did not tell him a single thing until the morning light. In the morning, when Nabal was sober, his wife told him these things, and his heart became like a dead man's, and he lay paralyzed like a stone. About 10 days later, Jehovah struck Nabal, and he died. Then David heard that Nabal had died. He said, "Praise Jehovah, who has pleaded my case, or of reproach from Nabal, and has kept his servant from doing anything bad. And Jehovah has brought the badness of Nabal back on his own head." Then David sent word to propose to Abigail to take her as his wife. So David's servants came up to Abigail at Carmel and said to her, "David has sent us to take you as his wife." She immediately rose up and bowed with her face to the ground and said, "Here is your slave as a servant to wash the feet of the servant of my Lord." Then Abigail quickly rose up and rode on her donkey, with 5 of her female servants walking behind her. She accompanied the messengers of David and became his wife. David had also married Ahinoam from Jezreel, and both women became his wives. But Saul had given his daughter Michal, David's wife, to Palti, the son of Laish, who was from Galim. End of Samuel 25, and that is the end of AV 28, I believe.